Good morning. Welcome to the program. Today is Tuesday, June 2nd, 2020. As unrest continues in America, I think we need to be very, very clear about what the president did yesterday from the Rose Garden. And I didn't think that it would ever come to this. But at this point, all of the traditional democratic institutions and the respect that even different political parties have for our institutions has completely been thrown away. As I was watching protest coverage, because I'm not losing sight of the fact that what is happening in this nation was set off by a torture and a murder. And then if you really think about it, the response to that of an American citizen who was innocent, who was unarmed, should be extreme. Because I don't know if people were awake to the fact that these kinds of things happen all too frequently and nothing happens. And so the response to seeing a man lose their life, because at this point, it really could be anybody. If you are not assured protection and justice and fairness and decency, if your life cannot be guaranteed by these very democratic institutions, that we have sent our troops to war so that other nations can have such democratic institutions, then people are naturally going to feel more than uneasy, but quite honestly, you should feel frightened. And so that's what started this. A murder started this. But to see the president authorize, first it was paramilitary force, because there were protests in the streets of Washington, D.C., and the commentators were waiting for the president to speak from the Rose Garden because they had been alerted that the president had a speech that he was going to give. And just prior to the president going on, and the CNN commentators were wondering, like, okay, why are they now pushing the protesters back? Now, remember, these protesters in Washington, D.C. at the time were peaceful. They were loud, they were making a lot of noise, but they weren't causing any trouble, any mayhem, any chaos. And then all of a sudden, the paramilitary forces of the D.C. police, and I believe the National Guard were there as well, got their shields up and they started pushing these protesters back. They had this wall of force, and then the flashbangs, and then the tear gas, just before the president is about to speak. That was all intentional. The president showed that he could unleash military forces on American citizens. It's one thing for governors to call up the mostly civilian, in fact, all civilian, National Guard. That's one thing. To assist with efforts on the ground. That's one thing. These are the governors making a very, very tough decision to provide auxiliary forces to local police departments, state troopers, etc. But the president threatening to turn the American military on American citizens is as bad as it can possibly get. Instead of the president addressing the solutions that we need, instead of the president addressing the vast inequalities that exist in every sphere in America, instead of the president addressing the pain and the hurt that people are feeling, he is not only adding to it, but he is threatening the very democratic institutions in the nation in which he is president. Now, I wish I could say, like, oh, I'm not shocked by this. You're all shocked by this. And to say you're not shocked by this is to not fully understand what is happening here. The president is trying to start a war in a nation that he is supposed to be leading while 104,000 people have died from the coronavirus. I try not to use really extreme language. I try not to. But at this point in time, witnessing what we have witnessed, if you are still a supporter of Donald Trump, and there are still a lot of supporters of Donald Trump, and you support his threat and his use of military action against American people. You yourself are an enemy of the state. If you support a strongman dictator, authoritarian president, you are an enemy of the state. Now, the most dreadful thing about this is while Donald Trump is putting on this strongman charade, he may get reelected. This is a man who was acting in a way with calculated caution because he probably doesn't want to go too far because it may hurt his reelection chances. If not going too far to him is having the DC police and National Guard interact, react, and become violent against peaceful protesters, which is your constitutional right, by the way, which Donald Trump clearly showed the entire world that he can violate in a moment's notice. He's acting in a cautious and reserved way because he's still worried about his reelection. Do you imagine? Can you imagine? If he gets reelected and gets 4 more years, in his mind, he will believe that everything that he did was spot on. Everything he did was correct, that Americans love him and agree with him. Now, also, keep in mind that the election is likely going to have some irregularities, let me put it that way. What they're going to be and how severe those irregularities are going to be, I'm not sure. But if you recall, in 2016, just before the polls closed, maybe even a day before the election in 2016, Donald Trump was floating the narrative that the election was rigged because even he knew that Hillary Clinton was going to win. So he put that information out to the nation that in the event that I lose, now he didn't say that part, but he knew he was going to lose. We all thought he was going to lose. There was no way the country would do something this ridiculous and this drastic. Yeah, we understand he had some really extreme rhetoric and he had some very unusual characters showing up at his rallies, but we thought that those folks could never get a majority of the electoral college vote. Well, and they did. But he was setting the country up to tell people that the election was rigged. So Hillary Clinton's victory would come under as much suspicion as her entire campaign and her record on Benghazi and all sorts of other things that Hillary Clinton had been accused of. You now have to take the threats that he makes seriously, including the ones that he made in 2016 when he said the election was rigged. Now he has the power to rig the election. If you can issue orders in which the American military is unleashed on American citizens. Now, there's still some legal challenges to that. It would be on request of the states, and I've got a little more detail about that because him drumming up the Insurrection Act of 1807, we were just barely a republic back then when things were dramatically different. And for him to use that loophole to send federal troops to American cities against the will of governors, if you support that, you're an enemy of the state. You are complicit in the dictatorship and modern fascism of Donald Trump. So I don't know if you guys saw that press conference, and then he goes over to the Episcopalian Church, the Church of the Presidents, and stands by himself in this very unusual and awkward pose. And he holds a Bible. Did you guys see that? And then he was joined by several members of his cabinet, not the entire cabinet, notably missing when the president wants to show strength and wants to show unity. He would have the vice president with him. He would have the first lady with him. They were noticeably missing. And then he holds this Bible in front of this church. Did you guys see that? Donald Trump was posing as God for the people of the United States. Again, if you are supporting Donald Trump, you are an enemy of the state. You're an enemy of freedom. You're an enemy of the people. You're an enemy of democracy. You are supporting authoritarianism. From CNN, Donald Trump made for TV embrace of authoritarianism's imagery and tools at a brittle national moment risks unleashing toxic political forces that threaten America's democratic traditions, Trump on Monday turned security forces on peaceful protesters in front of the White House as tear gas and rubber bullets flew before declaring himself the law and order president. Then, in one of the most bizarre moments in modern presidential history, he strode across the park to stand in front of an iconic church, holding a Bible aloft in a striking photo op. It was a moment of vanity and bravado, orchestrated for the cameras and transparently political, as Trump struggles to cope with protests sweeping the country after killing George Floyd and tries to cover up his botched leadership during the coronavirus pandemic. Overnight, the White House's official Twitter account released a triumphant video of the moment set to music, but omitting any signs of the mayhem unleashed on the protesters. Trump appeared to be trying to project strength at a moment when his presidency seems feckless and as the nation spins completely out of control. If it occurred abroad and not at the White House, Americans might perceive a ridiculous, self-deluding act of a wannabe strongman. This is the country that we live in. This is the country that we live in. When the United States has completely surrendered its democratic institutions to a dictator. I fear that in the event that he loses the election, which we can't even talk about the election at this point. There's so many things in front of this nation at this moment, including justice and fairness and decency. We can't even talk about politics right now. In the event that he loses the Electoral College and the popular vote, what happens to all of the people that support him, that are going to be and are indoctrinated to think that the election was rigged to get rid of their leader? These Democrats and George Soros and Hillary Clinton's name is going to be floated around, and Joe Biden conspired to silence Donald Trump. How do we turn back from this? Even if we begin to address the systemic issues in this nation, it takes cooperation and coordination from the federal government in which Donald Trump leads to provide the enforcement of the new rules and the new laws that we have to deal with this systemic oppression and racism in this system. But he will never do that. His presidency is now more illegitimate than I ever thought possible. And it will remain so. And now the people that still support him are as illegitimate as any nation we ever fought in any war. Good morning, Benita. Hello, Tracy. L.A. Thomas, good morning. Diane Blaylock, hi. Protection and, she says. Carmen Patterson, good morning. Lynette Tracy, he's not my president. I was trying to be respectful of the office, but I'm not anymore. You can't respect that, because now respecting the office and respecting the man and respecting the institutions that he has completely commandeered is fascism. If you look at how the German people were manipulated into believing that Adolf Hitler was some incredible supreme leader that spoke to the woes of the white working class in Germany, we are completely following that playbook. And what makes it so bad is we know how that ended. Donald Trump is rewriting a script that only America could put a stop to. I hate that we had to use a weapon of mass destruction, 2 of them, but we were the nation that put a stop to the worldwide tyranny. And yes, we had allies. At some point, there will be other free nations on the planet Earth that are done being alarmed by what Donald Trump is doing and will at some point want to support the American people that want to remove a dictator, because if it can happen here, it can happen anywhere else. There have been other democracies or fragile democracies throughout history that can get manipulated into electing or selecting or falling victim to the rhetoric of a strong man. It happens all the time. We were the least likely nation for something like that to happen. But if it happens here, you understand, it can happen anywhere in Europe. It can happen anywhere in Africa. It can happen anywhere in Asia. And for the tide to be stemmed of other leaders, and there are Donald Trump style leaders in Venezuela and other places, Brazil. There are other nations that might want to support the American people and our democracy because our democracy is what gives them hope. Now, another thing to consider is that Donald Trump still has the nuclear codes. He still has all of the power that we entrust in an American president. And at this point, I'm not even sure what we can do. I don't think that this gets better. And we don't even know what better is because we're still not even dealing with the issues that caused this mayhem in the first place. But America had always been at this tipping point. And we get close to the edge and something would pull us back. We get close to the edge and something would pull us back. It could be something as simple as sports that temporarily distract us or calm some of our more bitter political tendencies. We're not even going to have a Summer Olympics. Like, America needs to see what makes us proud. When we come together, when we work together, the spirit of competition. And as symbolic as it is, I think it might be more than symbolism, taking away sports, taking away people's jobs, taking away people's freedom to move about in public. The curfews are doing no good. They're not doing any good. I was watching probably one of the most beautiful things that I've ever seen take place in and around the city of Milwaukee and even into the suburbs. There were thousands of young people that marched. When I started watching these Facebook Lives, they were in the area of North Avenue and Prospect on Milwaukee's east side. And they marched all the way up Capitol Drive through the city of Milwaukee. I mean, I'm talking miles they marched. Not a window was broken. There was no vandalism. Now, they made a hell of a lot of noise now. They woke you up. But they were peaceful. And then as they would get to an area where the police had the road blocked off, and I'm watching all of this live via someone's Facebook camera. I was like, we're going to witness a clash, violence. And they were young. These were young kids. And I was waiting for the police to unleash the tear gas. And it was one of the most tense moments that I have felt. And I felt a lot of tense moments because I knew something was going to happen to these children at the hands of law enforcement and it was going to play out live. And so I was holding my breath, and then they're in Shorewood, or very close to Shorewood, which protests in the city are one thing, but once you start disturbing the segregated white suburbs in Milwaukee County, if there was any time in which I thought those young people were going to be met with resistance and force from law enforcement, it was going to be there. And so they're at the intersection of, it had to have been Oakland and Capitol Drive, so right where Milwaukee ends and Shorewood begins, and they have this barricade of police cars stopping them from proceeding up, I believe it's Oakland Boulevard. If the young people get past this police barricade, they're in the suburbs. They're no longer in the city. Quiet, sleepy, lakeshore communities. The only thing stopping those young people from getting into that jurisdiction was a line of police cars. And the police let them through. And they cheered. And they clapped. And then they chanted, "Walk with us. Walk with us." Not just calling out to the people in the sleepy suburbs that pretend the issues and problems of the city are not their problems. These young people weren't just saying, "Walk with us" to those residents. They were saying, "Walk with us" to the police. Now, of course, the police did not. But that was a monumental moment in which the police had to make an executive decision, because if there had been unrest and those young people decided to emulate what has been happening all over the nation in these suburban communities, there would have been a major problem with the police's decision to let the protesters go. But in that moment, you got to look really hard nowadays to find diplomacy. The police essentially said, when they remove their barriers of squad cars. We are going to protect your right to do this, to make a lot of noise, because it was young people walking, some were in cars, every horn was beeping, and it was hundreds, if not thousands, of young people. The police acted in a manner in which builds confidence amongst those who are discontent with the actions of the police. It was a level of respect. You guys can come to this quiet lakeshore suburban community and wake these people up with the promise that you maintain the dignity of your peaceful protest. And it was just a monumental moment. And so as the young people continued to move into Shorewood, they made just as much noise as they did when they were near downtown Milwaukee. And it was necessary, because for far too long, people that weren't affected, people who just didn't care, who were unmoved by the violence, by the disparity, by the poverty, by the low wages, they were allowed to sleep at night and get rest and not have to be concerned about their future. But they were woken up last night. And I don't know if that's going to be featured on the news. There were a number of news cameras that were embedded in that crowd. But that is what people need to see. But it also warms my heart because it was something that my generation has not done. We never did that. We never woke the suburbs up. We could have, and we had ample opportunity to do so. But we didn't. And it was in that moment of watching those young people with their Facebook lives filming everything that was going on and everything around them, including filming the police part the Red Sea so that they could continue on their peaceful protest march. That was when I knew that this generation is going to be better than us. They have courage that we didn't have. And it's really easy to be disrespectful to young people because every generation deals with, oh, you're lazy, you're entitled. These kids today, they did it right. And I just hope that they maintain that sentiment for the rest of their lives. But it was also noted that, and there'll probably be some complaints about this, because there's going to be a number of people upset that the police let these young people continue a peaceful protest. But think about what they're protesting. They're protesting injustice. They're protesting a man being tortured and murdered, and the police getting away with it, and 3 officers still not arrested. That's as righteous a cause as you could ever hope for. And if you're upset at them, it's because you're jealous that you couldn't do it and that we don't have the courage. And I stand in support of those young folk. They're going to lead this nation, and thank God there's a generation that has that kind of fortitude to push back against a system that has just been killing people. When the police tried to steer this large mass of people and cars and noise and chants and car horns beeping, they would simply take their vehicles and drive on the grass. They would drive on the sidewalk because at some point the traffic was bottlenecked. They drove on the side. The sidewalk was now a right-of-way for vehicles. Well, that's probably a little bit dangerous. They had no choice. They were not going to be stopped. You have to respect that they were going to keep moving. But you know what it also said? That they were taking the streets back. Not just the streets, they were taking people's front yards back. They were taking the sidewalk back because the cause in which they were fighting was more righteous than the beauty of someone's manicured and landscaped lawn. Those are the stories that we need to tell. These are the young people that we need to encourage. And I know it makes you very uncomfortable what they did, but if Donald Trump threatening to unleash the U.S. military on American citizens who are protesting for righteousness, then I would say that you probably have your priorities screwed up. I'm going to take a break. When I come back, I want to get into a few more details of what the president's order could potentially mean. And I also want to discuss with you via the comments on Facebook how we can move out of this and what our solutions are going to be, because we now see that there are people who are willing to fight the good fight. But it's going to require those of us that have a little bit more life experience with the system to try and give instruction on exactly what can and should be implemented so we don't ever see this again. You're listening to The Forum. I'm your host, Sherwin Hughes, and I'll be right back. As a nonprofit grassroots lobbying organization, Leaders for a Better Community believes that residents, stakeholders, and hardworking families have the solutions to the most pressing issues of the day. Whether it's improving our system of public education, job creation, or public safety reform, it's your ideas that should be the driving force behind thoughtful public policy. Join our fight for a better quality of life at lbcmke.org, paid for by Leaders for a Better Community.
We are confronted primarily with a moral issue. It is as old as the Scriptures and is as clear as the American Constitution. The heart of the question is whether all Americans are to be afforded equal rights and equal opportunities, whether we are going to treat our fellow Americans as we want to be treated. If an American, because his skin is dark, cannot eat lunch in a restaurant open to the public, if he cannot send his children to the best public school available, if he cannot vote for the public officials who represent him, if, in short, he cannot enjoy the full and free life which all of us want, then who among us would be content to have the color of his skin changed and stand in his place? Who among us would then be content with the counsels of patience and delay? 100 years of delay have passed since President Lincoln freed the slaves, yet their heirs, their grandsons, are not fully free. They are not yet freed from the bonds of injustice. They are not yet freed from social and economic oppression. And this nation, for all its hopes and all its boasts, will not be fully free until all its citizens are free.
Welcome back. I teeter back and forth between all of these different emotions of what is happening. And sometimes it seems like I'm not even in America. This is not happening here. This is a very unusual reality television show in which the star of this reality television show is the star of another reality television show, The Apprentice. It isn't real. But there's a lesson to be learned in all of this, because there were people that supported Donald Trump that didn't think it would come to this, that didn't think that he would go this far. But it also needs to be noted, as a lot of media has been looking to him and using that as their talking point, we need leadership. We need a president who can talk about reconciliation, someone that can bring the country together. Donald Trump is not doing that. Well, that's painfully obvious. He was elected by exploiting the divisions in this nation, most of which we tried to keep at bay, but they would also be dramatically brought up. Like, we'd want to think that everything is okay when it comes to racism and inequality, but then something happens that reminds us, but then we're distracted by something else. And we'd always been teetering on this line, and what Donald Trump did is he took that crack, these series of cracks and fissures that have always existed in America, and he used them and he exploited them. And what I believe is a minority of people that feel a particular way about integration and about fairness and about decency and treating people with, treating their lives with a level of respect. Donald Trump amplified that sentiment. And due to a very unusual set of circumstances in 2016, he was able to win the Electoral College by 77,000 votes. That's not a lot. He didn't landslide anything. It was just 77,000 votes, essentially condensed down to 3 states. 3 states that should have been blue, but in a very unusual and experimental moment in modern American democracy, they voted for the Republican, or people just stayed home. So elections have consequences, and here is the consequence. You can lose this fragile democracy. Benjamin Franklin said we have a republic if we can keep it. As of right now, we cannot keep it. We have essentially surrendered it because he amplified the divisions that exist. And it isn't anything that an American president has ever really done before to this extent. And so wanting him to bring the country together or bring calming words to his next press conference, he is simply not going to do it because he can only thrive in these moments of division. And so he has to maintain them. But the frightening part is, if the country begins to show signs of healing from within, so without his leadership, and just even free from elected officials, because they certainly have a lot to say about the times that we're in, but some of them got elected on the same division. This is going to have to be a movement of democracy-loving, free people who separate themselves from an entire political party. And let's be honest, the Republicans have been complicit in destroying the Constitution that they say they love. He is going to continue to go further and further and push further and further. And if America decides it wants to take it upon itself to bring the nation back together and not wait for him, that is when I think he will be at his wit's end, because he can't see the nation galvanizing against him. And don't think that he's not planting these Antifa terrorists in these protests. They've already been outed. What we don't have is the direct connection between Donald Trump and Donald Trump-leaning organizations that are putting these people who are destroying cities. We already know. There's evidence all over the place. The number of people that were arrested in Minneapolis and St. Paul weren't even from there. There's reports of cars with their license plates removed and blacked out windows, and when the police try to apprehend the individuals who were driving those vehicles, they take off on foot. Would you really be shocked if Donald Trump or organizations that support him would be planting people in the crowd and then calling it Antifa? Why does that shock anyone? It shouldn't. He'll go that far. And if the country begins to heal around him, if it sees him as the tumor and wants to isolate him because he is the problem now, he will go further. He is rewriting the entire playbook. From CNN, President Donald Trump threatened on Monday night to invoke the Insurrection Act of 1807 and take the unusual step of deploying active duty U.S. soldiers to police the streets of America. While Trump claims the move would break up anti-fascists, or Antifa, who he says are organizing violent riots, have led to looting, it would also effectively quelch peaceful protests for racial justice after the death last week of George Floyd. Could you imagine the President of the United States sending in the power of the U.S. military to stop your constitutional right to peaceably protest? Could you imagine for a moment that the uptick of violence and the looting and the fires have been planted by organizations seeking to give the president more credibility when he wants to send troops on American citizens? Don't think that's far-fetched. You know what's far-fetched? The president posing with a Bible in front of a church, pretending like he is God. I played a clip yesterday, and I'm going to have to play it again for those of you that didn't hear it. When we had protests in the state of Wisconsin, in the city of Madison, protesting a union-busting bill signed into law by our governor, there was a prank telephone call that was made to then Governor Scott Walker, where someone was posing as one of the Koch brothers, David Koch. Scott Walker thought it was David Koch because the phone call got patched through to the governor. The governor was told, oh, David Koch is on line one. And David Koch, who Scott Walker thought was David Koch, said, we're thinking about planting some troublemakers in the crowd, referring to the peaceful protests in Madison, Wisconsin, people protesting their unions being destroyed by an act of authoritarianism by Governor Scott Walker. And you know what Scott Walker said on this recording? You know what he said? He said, you know what, we thought about that, but the only reason why Scott Walker didn't put rabble-rousers in the crowd of peaceful protesters is because he believed that the people of the state of Wisconsin would encourage him to settle. Scott Walker is not comparable at all to Donald Trump. He didn't have the political will, he didn't have the power, he didn't have the U.S. military behind him, but imagine someone that does. And so it is not far-fetched to think that Donald Trump has a hand in the insurrection that he needs to show so that he can get more support for putting the military on American citizens. He is behind all of this. Now, those of you who will continue to protest peacefully, and I don't think the protests are going to stop. In fact, they're going to grow. If you notice someone starting trouble, and they could be black, they're not going to be white all the time, but someone who begins to elevate the discourse of what is a peaceful march or a protest, or the person that breaks the first window, be mindful of who that person very well may be, because they could be planted by organizations that are sympathetic to the president and wanting to crush your constitutional rights. Because if you crush this constitutional right, then you can crush the rest of them. See, what the country has always been doing, there's always been a sentiment that wants to figure out a way how we can take some rights away from the American people. Because as people grow in power and grow in wealth and grow in their ability to control policy, their enemy becomes democracy and freedom-loving people. There have always been authoritative types in this nation, and they fear a democracy. They fear an uprising to some extent, and I'm eating a bunch of crow when I say this, the movement that Bernie Sanders tried to start. It used to be the 99% when they were marching on Wall Street. No real clear aim or direction, but they were upset. And the sentiments that were brewing from the Bernie Sanders campaign in 2016, where young people are crushed by student debt. They'll never be able to buy a house. They'll never be able to start a family. Wages are too low. They pay too much for an education that we told them to get. We told the young people to get a college education. And because we told them to get the college education, tuition went up. The amount of loans they had to take went up. The interest that they're buried under went up. We saddled those young people with debt, so much so that they won't ever have the opportunity to right the wrongs of other stifling corporations. They won't have the opportunity to be owners and managers of businesses that will really pay people fair wages and provide people with health insurance. That genuine sentiment in America is being stifled by a handful of people. And Donald Trump represents them too. He gave them a tax cut with your money. While Trump claims the move would break up anti-fascists or Antifa, who he says are organizing violent riots that have led to looting, it would also effectively quench peaceful protests for racial justice after the death last week of George Floyd. That would be a remarkable turn on the law, which was most notably used in the 1950s to enforce desegregation, and later in the 1960s to address riots in Detroit. According to the Congressional Research Service, it hasn't been invoked since, that's fairly modern, 1992, during the riots in Los Angeles that followed the acquittal of 4 white police officers in the beating of Rodney King. Now Attorney General William Barr was actually Attorney General back then too, under former President George H.W. Bush. So there is some history here. Congress amended the law after Hurricane Katrina in 2006 to give more clarity about its use during natural disasters, but dropped some of those changes a year after projections by state governors who did not want to cede their authority. But Trump said on Monday that if governors did not act to his liking, so now governors are going to have to fall under the thumb of a dictatorial president. Some Republican governors will. We hope that Democratic governors representing the Union and not the Confederacy will not. Quote, if the city or state refuses to take the actions that are necessary to defend the life and property of their residents, then I will deploy the United States military and quickly solve the problem for them. Can you imagine for a moment if Donald Trump or those organizations sympathetic to him and his cause are planting individuals to intentionally uptick this violence, so Donald Trump now has justification to turn the military on free peace-loving, democratic American citizens. Don't think that's beyond him. Please don't. We have to stop thinking that, oh, he would never do that. We were saying that all through 2016. He ran a presidential campaign on building a wall to keep people out of this nation. But we want products that are built in Mexico. We want cheap goods built in Mexico. We just don't want people who provide the labor from Mexico. He has to continue to go further and further and further. Just look at the uptick in his rhetoric since the campaign of 2016 to where he now is unleashing the military on American citizens. He's not going to stop. He's not going to wake up one day and say, oh boy, I went too far. Let me pull back a little bit and let me talk about bringing the country together. At this point, he can't. But there may be curbs on what Donald Trump can actually do. One section of the law suggests that states must first request help, but other portions of the Insurrection Act do not require a governor or state legislature's okay, such as when the president determines the situation in a state makes it impossible to enforce U.S. laws or when citizens' rights are abridged. Historically and practically, such a request is not necessarily a prerequisite to the president using regular federal troops for domestic law enforcement, said Stephen Valdek, a University of Texas law professor and a CNN contributor. These are examples of presidents using troops over the objection of governors, as Dwight Eisenhower and later John F. Kennedy and Lyndon Johnson used during the Civil Rights era. In particular, Eisenhower invoked the Insurrection Act when he federalized the Arkansas National Guard and then sent the 101st Airborne Division into Little Rock to integrate the schools. Trump can do this. He has precedent that allows him to do this. And he has an Attorney General, Attorney General Barr, who was Attorney General when George H.W. Bush federalized troops in the 1992 Rodney King riots. L.A. Thomas says that photo op to a damn Bible he never uses. Lynette Tracy says, but he can't unleash military forces on people who storm their state capitol with guns. He's making the situation worse, not addressing any solutions because he is not smart and he is unqualified. He got elected being unqualified, though. The only reason why a lot of people support him fanatically is because he validates the racism. That's correct, Lynette. Lori Patterson says Trump is the epitome of the meaning coward. That might be kind to call him a coward. He's many other things that probably can't say because the Secret Service might knock on my door. Secret Service comes to my door. Coronavirus, sorry, I can't let you in. You got to social distance. Put a mask on. Lynette Tracy, but he tried to push America forward considering the passing of the 1964 Civil Rights Act and the 1965 Voting Rights Act, talking about Lyndon Baines Johnson. Isn't it amazing the last time we had to federalize troops and send them into American cities and American states, it was to protect the freedoms and rights of African Americans against Confederates. Now Donald Trump wants to federalize troops to give the Confederates the federal help that they never got, including during the Civil War. L.A. Thomas, several white members, probably referring to whatever I was saying at the time. Good morning, Renee. Trump is textbook psychopath. Agreed. Tammy Reed says that was awful. Monica Walsh, Trump is a desperate man. He is. Adolf Hitler was desperate too. And I'm not sure if you guys know how Adolf Hitler's life came to an end. But these stories don't end well regardless. America cannot continue down this path. And the further he pushes us, I think that is the only thing that can bring the unity and the reconciliation that we need. We have to stop looking for someone else to bring us together. And let me say this about my people who I love so very dearly. My black people. We can't wait for the next Martin Luther King. We're always looking at who the next leader is. And then if whoever we have at the time, like our elected officials or those that are helping our communities see more economic opportunity and fighting the good fight for us, if they have shortcomings, our black elected officials, then we discredit them because we have such a high standard because we once had a Dr. King. We think that you have to meet his standard to be considered a leader. And so we're constantly roaming the desert looking for this next leader, when really the leaders are all of us collectively. When we work together and implement solutions, that's what America's supposed to be. Not one person telling everybody what to do. That's what got us here in the first place. And also, if we get another Dr. King, America would just kill them. Leadership must be decentralized. We got to get that through our collective heads. And sometimes I fall victim to that. Movements are the leadership. An agenda to protect people's rights, to protect our democracy, to give people health care, a fair wage, clean water, clean air. That agenda is the leadership. It's us getting behind it, not an individual person who can speak very well. Because if you can condense all that America wants to do, all the justice, all the righteousness into one person, then it's easy to decapitate that entire movement and send the nation into chaos. We're the leaders. That's why we're looking around, looking for the leader, because we're not looking in the mirror. And until we do that, Donald Trump is going to continue to manipulate the situation where, for some reason, people still can't bond together because of issues of race. If you're poor in this country, I don't care if you're poor and black, poor and white, poor and Asian, poor and Mexican, you have more that binds you than separates you. If you feel oppression in this system, regardless of your race, your culture, your religion, your country of national origin, you have more in common with everybody else in this nation than you do with someone like this president. Lynette Tracy says, I'm scared because I feel like his followers will become violent like we have never seen. And so I would agree with you when you say that, Lynette, because his followers are becoming violent because they are being implanted in these crowds. Now, was it all Donald Trump supporting people in these crowds in the beginning? No, it was people that were genuinely angry that were making a political statement. If life can't be respected by a police officer, then no building should stand, no business should be able to operate. We got very comfortable in a nation where injustice was something that was reduced to a soundbite or an article in a publication that nobody reads or a handful of tweets. You have to push to the extremes because the deprivation that people feel is also extreme. And so if you tell somebody I have a hungry belly or I'm poor or my wages aren't enough or I don't have health insurance or whatever the case may be, they're not always going to listen. They may give you thoughts and prayers. But it takes dramatic and drastic action to wake people up. And I'm not going to say I agree with it or I disagree with it, but now you will remember George Floyd's name forever, and everything that happened after that will fundamentally change this nation, and I hope it changes this nation for the good. But if it just got reduced to a story that was done or an article that was written or a couple of evenings on the nightly news, we would not have gotten the fundamental change that we need to the system that is stifling people. You guys know that 104,000 people are dead because of this pandemic because Donald Trump, when he should have taken executive action to help save Americans' lives, he went golfing. The day he found out that the coronavirus was going to strike and do incredible damage to the life and the health and the safety of Americans, he went golfing. When he went golfing, even the people that support him, even the people that believe in him, he let them die too. Marcy Stutzman says, good morning. How's Stacy? So I don't know if you guys saw this. You guys know who Stacey Dash is? So I got to be nice to her because she sent me a message. Stacey Dash is a nut job, right-wing Republican Trump supporter. And it's so heartbreaking, too. You know, if you go to the I shared it all over the place, of the Forum Facebook group, Stacey Dash left me a message and was flirting with me. I can't help it. If I was her, I would flirt with me too. Good morning, voice of reason. Thank you, Denise Washington. Lynette Tracy, this is scary. Think about how the persecution of the Jews started. Now it's the people of color and poor people. People of color and poor people have always faced persecution. I have no respect for the office of the president right now. You're not alone, Jackie Guy. Mr. President Trump, old Bunker Bob. They're using another term, not Bunker Bob, it's Bunker something else. So when they were about to take the White House, because you know people were emboldened when they saw that a police precinct in Minneapolis, that must have been Wednesday night? When did they take the 3rd District Police did? Thursday night. Let me take a moment on that because I want to make sure I am illustrating the important details and some of the images and the symbolism of what we saw. The police who project this strength, in fact, so much strength that they can murder someone while being videotaped and have their hand in their pocket while they're doing it as a man is being tortured. His blood was coming out of his nose as we're seeing his life ooze out of his body. The police project this image of strength that is above the law. Yet the 3rd District Police Station, which some symbolically would say was the heavy hand of law enforcement that has disproportionately incarcerated black people and poor people and brown people. So the symbolism of a police station, it fell like a house of cards. So even the institutions that appear to have power and strength in this nation can burn. That emboldened people a couple of nights later because there was a method to taking that police station. Now, that was not your Donald Trump Antifa folks. That was not people that were planted to make these protests look more violent than they actually are, because there is some of that. And there are organizations and people who are sympathetic to Donald Trump that need the nation to see all of the looting and the rioting and the violence, so Donald Trump then gets the authority to send in the military. When they burned the police station down, that was the democracy saying, yes, you may have strength when you can outnumber a black person, but you are no match for an angry public. And they almost took the 5th precinct. The 5th precinct was warned, but by that time, that is when the National Guard forces really came out in high numbers in the state of Minnesota, in Minneapolis, St. Paul area. That was incredibly symbolic. So as strong as the police union seem to be in protecting their own, even when they break the law, they're no match for an angry public. Marcy May says, thank goodness for the separation of powers in the Constitution that keep him from becoming a dictator. So, yes and no, Marcy May. The Constitution is a lot more fragile than I thought. This president is doing this and is threatening to unleash the military on American citizens and pose with a Bible awkwardly in front of a church. I think I have that story where the bishop of that Episcopalian church was like, he didn't tell me he was using my church as the backdrop. We had no idea. He was impeached. You guys know that Donald Trump was impeached? Do you remember that, or was that ancient history? He is doing this as a man who has been impeached. So I would like to think that the Constitution can stop him from being a dictator. All he needs is authority from the democracy. People that still agree with him, people that still believe in him, and he can become a dictator. That trust is being placed in him to such an extent by some people that they are willing to forego their constitutional rights, because he is eroding their constitutional rights as well. If Donald Trump can send the U.S. military on individuals who are protesting peacefully, then if you're a Trump supporter and you want to protest peacefully, he's taking away your rights too. He is trying at all levels to be that dictator, but finds he does not have as much power as president. It shows me how much the office of the president is just a figurehead for the country. 100% it is. It's symbolic. Because this is a man who's impeached. You'd think after being impeached, you're like, let me chill. let me work on policy or something for a little while. Let me change direction. No. I was listening to the Scanners, Lynette Tracy. They had no choice. State Patrol was on standby. They were okay with letting walking protesters through versus cars. They wanted a visual on everyone. On the Scanner, the officers were saying that it was peaceful. I wish all the activists here were on the same page. Tammy Reed says someone forgot to tell Agent Orange. I've heard many creative insults hurled at the president. Some are very funny. And he essentially, in the early days of his presidency, when it was funny because he was ridiculous. And, oh, this stuff won't stand. He won't be able to get away with this. And so all the people that called him these very funny names. And then as Donald Trump continued to escalate his rhetoric and continue to get support, not just from people that voted for him, but Republicans, then it didn't become funny anymore. The first act of his presidency, the first months, the first years, it started with his inauguration. Do you guys remember when they tore Washington, D.C. up in January 20th, 2017, when he was inaugurated? Remember that? The whole hullabaloo about how many people were at his inauguration. Then he showed one picture, which clearly was not his inauguration. Then they showed the real picture of his inauguration, and he got embarrassed. You guys remember that? I got to point to these symbolisms that we sometimes forget because we're always inundated with news and constantly connected to it. They tore Washington, D.C. up when he was inaugurated. You guys remember that? They rioted in Washington, D.C. Trump hadn't even done anything yet but get elected and get inaugurated. They rioted and tore Washington, D.C. up. They broke windows of businesses just on his inauguration. That sentiment has existed since the moment he, how symbolic is this, put his hand on the Bible and became the 45th president of the United States. Those people knew. They knew that it potentially could come to this. And so they showed that they're here, they're present, and they're always going to push back on what this man stands for. And I'm guilty of this. I thought that when he got sworn in that the Constitution would be stronger and keep him in check. I thought that there would be Republicans who used to didn't like Russia, Republicans who used to didn't like Vladimir Putin, Republicans that used to want to put sanctions on Russia and other nations. I used to think that they would step in and put this president in check, or at least take him, into a private room and say, look, Mr. President, we're Republicans like you, but why don't we do this? Why don't we use policy and do some other old school tricks? And why don't we be a little bit more sensible? Let's try and fly under the radar with some of the rhetoric. I thought those Republicans were going to do that, but they didn't. And so those people that rioted in Washington, D.C., and then Jeff Sessions threatened them with federal charges. A few got arrested, but not many. A few got charged with some federal charges, but not many. In fact, I think the federal charges may have been dropped. Because remember, Jefferson Beauregard Sessions was Donald Trump's first attorney general. Jefferson Beauregard Sessions, who is named after not one, but two Confederates. Jefferson Davis and P.T. Beauregard. Two Confederate generals is who Jeff Sessions was named after. And then Donald Trump fired him because he didn't act as Donald Trump's personal attorney during the impeachment proceedings. Dora Drake says, I completely agree. The future is in our youth, and they showed us what courage looks like. That's the thing about youth. A couple of things about youth, as I'm no longer young. Sometimes that youth is wasted on the young because you just don't know how powerful you are when you're a young person. When you don't have the lived experiences and headaches and heartache of responsibility. Over time, just life itself slows you down. Your priorities change, your responsibilities increase. All the youth have to do now, before they're burdened with all of the responsibilities of just getting older and becoming more mature, all they have to do now, while it's a lofty request, is protect their future. To make sure that this never happens again. So that we can live in peace. History is violent. Ideals are peaceful. Good morning, Kelly McClendon. Lynette Tracy, I am uncomfortable because I don't know. I am not that brave, but I wish we also matched when we kill each other. But I wish we also matched when we kill each other. And the unjust criminal justice system. What's up, Daryl? Eileen, good morning. I started a watch party today's show so that I could share with my entire Facebook network. Thank you. Can't let Trump have the shock and awe effect on us. This is what he is trying to do. So at this point, let me say this. If you supported this president in the beginning, and maybe you supported him through the impeachment, maybe you chanted "Build the Wall," maybe you went to his rallies, maybe you did that, maybe you even donated to his campaign. I'm talking to you folks right now because I know you're listening. If you did that, let me tell you something. You're welcome to come back home and join freedom-loving people in this nation at any time. We have not lost faith in you because we need you too. We disagreed on who you supported. We disagreed on your tactics. We disagree on your rhetoric. But we need you to now be an American, to now fight for all of the things that you say the flag means. If you support the military, then you do not support the president's threat to send them on American citizens. You say you support the military, and when Colin Kaepernick was leaning and he was disrespecting the flag by continuing to support this man, you are disrespecting the flag and our veterans because you are trying to give the authority to a man, to these veterans that you support. Could you imagine an entire generation of U.S. veterans that earned their military experience because they turned their guns on American citizens? Those of you that supported this president and now you've had enough, you are welcome to join us. We're not going to pass judgment on you. We get it. We know you were duped too. Join us. The only way in which we get this country back is if you are willing to let go to what you thought he promised you. He lied to you. And I know you don't want to hear that coming from me. You don't have to apologize to us for supporting him and going to his rallies. Apologize to us by promoting a free, loving democracy in our republic. Just let him go. The only way we get this thing back on the right track is if we come together. We can no longer let this man divide us, because when he is divided, he is going to win. Not you that support him, not his political affiliation. They're going to lose too. There are some things that are more important than a party affiliation. And we are at that moment right now. Narcissistic people love to be the center of attention and everything to be about them. And also, we've given Donald Trump an awful lot of attention. In fact, the further he goes with his rhetoric and with his actions, the more attention he gets, that, the media clutches their pearls. I can't believe he said that. I can't believe it. Why would he say that? And then the next 3 days of stories are about what Donald Trump said. When we begin to take away the attention from this disgusting political tantrum, he loses his power. What are we going to do if he wins again? So if you remember the rioting and the destruction that took place when Donald Trump was first inaugurated, if he gets reelected, it will be worse than what we're seeing right now. So let's do one thing at a time. We're also going to have a conversation with Joe Biden because he is our only hope. And I know that, let me not say that, he's not our only hope. We are our only hope, but he could be the one that can support, with federal law, the changes we need to see in the political and policy solutions to the disparities that exist. So Joe Biden would actually uphold the law, and then whatever comes out of this, from us working together and discussing and coming up with ideas and with policy, Joe Biden would actually enforce the will of the people that want to see a much more fair and just America. So even if we came up with the policy solutions at the local level, at the state level, and maybe even legislation for our federal legislators, our members of the House and the Senate, Donald Trump wouldn't enforce anything, nor would he sign any of those bills into law. If there's a bill, a federal bill that curbs police powers, or at least puts additional measures to curb police powers, Donald Trump wouldn't sign it. Mitch McConnell wouldn't pass it. So we do need to have a level of focus on him, but we also need a Democratic majority in the U.S. Senate. If we get a Democratic majority in the U.S. Senate, Trump is done. Trump will get marched off to prison. He will see the justice that we have always been calling for. So it isn't just about Joe Biden. Joe Biden needs one hell of a support staff with members of Congress. Also keeping in mind that if Ruth Bader Ginsburg leaves us, Donald Trump will be able to appoint someone to the U.S. Supreme Court that is as extreme when it comes to their judicial philosophy as Donald Trump is in upholding the Constitution. So Donald Trump's sentiments can be codified in an activist, ideological Supreme Court justice, and those who support Donald Trump and they supported him because they know the justices that he will appoint, their kids are going to get screwed too by that decision, by whoever Donald Trump appoints. He has got a number of potential Supreme Court justices laying in wait right now. So, do you guys have any spare kidneys or lungs? Because in case Ruth Bader Ginsburg needs an organ, instead of sending her thoughts and prayers if she gets sick, send her a kidney just to make sure she can make it until Joe Biden can appoint somebody to replace Ruth Bader Ginsburg. Because you know who the replacement for Ruth Bader Ginsburg is going to be under a Joe Biden administration. I'm going to say it right now and get on the record. It's going to be Barack Obama. The best place that we can ever have Barack Obama right now in these times, because a lot of this is going to have to be undone. Because there's a new political pathway that is unfortunately being forged right now that some other Republicans are going to follow. They're going to want to follow in the footsteps of Donald Trump. And to make sure that the Constitution is upheld, you need the political sentiments of Barack Obama on the U.S. Supreme Court for the next 40 years. Replying to Lynette, Anna says, Lynette, we have to contact everyone we know and unites. People like Sherwin Hughes are leaders. We just need to listen. I'm just a humble servant. And somebody gave me internet access and a laptop and a microphone, and because I'm working from home, and so I might as well talk to you guys. He's mentally unfit. Jason Fields, either the Secret Service or Stacey Dash. Listen, Jason. First of all, if Stacey Dash comes to my house, I'm going to end this broadcast. Not only because me and her need to have a talk, because I don't agree with her political philosophies. I'm talking about the video that Stacey Dash made for me that somebody paid for. But no, Stacey Dash knocks at my door. I'm like, oh, guys, I'll see you tomorrow. Maybe. Why is the Second Amendment always mentioned, but never the other amendment? He doesn't know any other amendments. Oran Day, he doesn't know any other amendments. Love the leadership point you're making. Thanks, Jay. Tammy Reed, clean water. We still have lead in the water in the city of Milwaukee. No, they get technical about the lead in our water here. It's not the water itself, but it's the lead pipes. There's an environmental crisis that is happening and a pandemic while all of this is transpiring in front of our eyes. Leadership is all of us. Jason, I couldn't agree more. Tammy Reed, love the way your voice changed when you brought up Stacey. Did it really? Oh, that's embarrassing. Did I get all sentimental? Stop blushing, dog. All right, you know what? Can you guys get off of Stacey Dash? Don't. Henry Leonard, as a white 62-year-old male, the rioting and looting do not nearly bother me as much as the president using this to derail this very just movement. In my view, and I am looking for others' perspectives, he will use anything to retain power. But for what reason? Certainly not to change policies and laws that create a safe and just society for black and other minorities. Certainly not for economic justice, easily the majority of us. Certainly not for the collective good of our democracy. The riots in the 1960s had a similar result: spread fear, justify order at any cost, and keep the status quo in place. I am not justifying violence, but I have worked with and talked with thousands of people from these neighborhoods. Nothing has changed because those in power have not instituted the change. What choices do we have? Organize, keep our focus, develop a plan that does not allow the white nationalist agenda to continue. Brilliant. Thank you for your years of hard work. Tammy Reed, I saw that message from the bishop of the church. Like, wait a minute. L.A. Thomas, say that. I'm going to say it. Tammy Reed, the bystanding Republicans haven't done/said a dang thing. And even if they do, Romney, they either walk it back or they say, well, definitely agree about supporting the military and sending them to regulate American citizens. Justin Firminich, Biden's town hall with Lightfoot and Keisha Lance Bottoms was awesome yesterday. I missed that. There's so many briefings and updates, and now every bit of news is breaking news, and it's hard to keep it all straight. But those of you who pay attention, who believe in fact, and who are combing through news, when you find stories that are worthy of note, that are important, interviews and whatnot, send them to my inbox, because you guys have a lot more ears than I do. So if there's anything that is worthy of note and positive things that we can talk about, by all means, send them to my inbox. You guys are sending everything else to my inbox. Might as well send me some good stories that we can discuss. Would you guys leave Stacey Dash alone? Listen, I'm a victim in all of this. I didn't tell Stacey Dash to wear that shirt. Sherwin, don't let her in. No, she might be a weary traveler. I'm going to have to end this broadcast, because if I get Stacey Dash on the brand, then we're not going to make sense. Wise words. Thank you, Kathleen. L.A. Thomas, don't drink the poison. Jason Fields, under the current environments, I would love to hear your commentary on the gap amongst white evangelicals and black Christians. Oh, that's an hour, Jason. You know that's a whole hour conversation. You have come a long way, bro. Thank you, Ben Watson. Keep up the good work. Proud of you. I appreciate that. Jason replying to Dora Drake. Dora Drake, by the way, is running in the 11th Assembly District. Jason Fields, my very good friend and a commentator and a legislator who has forged a path of how you can get things done even when you're a Democrat in the minority. He is not seeking re-election, but Jason is supporting Dora Drake in the 11th Assembly District. Let me also say this, and I wasn't going to address it, but I think now we need to. So in the 11th Assembly District, where Jason Fields is not running for re-election and Dora Drake is running and is being endorsed not just by me but others, Jason Fields included, there is a Republican, an African-American Republican that is running in the 11th Assembly District, and he was deceptive and he lied to people when he was getting his nomination signatures, because you need a certain number of valid signatures from electors to get on the ballot. He was lying to people because people didn't know who he was, and he was lying to them and masking the fact that he is actually a Trump-loving Republican and duping our community members into signing his nomination signatures. He is now on the ballot, and he is running as a Trump-loving, ultra-conservative Republican that, quite honestly, Orlando Owens is probably standing for everything that Donald Trump is doing. Orlando Owens is probably supporting the U.S. military being turned on American kids that are protesting for justice. And he had a lot of things to say about me, because what Orlando forgets is that for a long time, he was just a clown. He was someone that we poked fun at because he was very unserious. And a long time ago, he also used to be a Democrat, but he didn't get any attention for being a Democrat because his ideas were feckless. And then when he became a black Republican overnight, he got a lot of attention, because if you're black and you agree to be a Republican, Republicans will put you out front because they think that you as a black Republican will attract more attention. If you're a black Republican now, you might as well go back to Africa. There's no use for you here. And listen, you can be whatever political affiliation that you want. Be a black Republican, be a white Republican, whatever the case may be. If you're a Trump supporter, and no, don't go back to Africa. Africa's beautiful. Go to the ocean and get a volleyball to be your best friend like Tom Hanks. What was that movie when Tom Hanks was on the beach talking to the volleyball? And so I did an interview with Orlando Owens because he's such a clown. Like, he's so ridiculous. And it's when you do talk radio, and I used to do talk radio on the broadcast airwaves, he's really entertaining because he's ridiculous. And so I did an interview with him in 2018 in which he was supporting every single one of Donald Trump's positions in 2018. He thought the impeachment was a sham. He thought the Russia investigation was a lie. He didn't believe the Russians influenced the presidential election. He even defended Donald Trump's positions on Hillary Clinton. He defended Donald Trump's positions on everything, on dethroning our democratic institutions that have made this republic strong. So in this interview that I did with Orlando Owens, he laid it all out there. He was an unabashed Trump supporter. He even showed up to the interview wearing a Make America Great Again hat. And if you go to my website, theforum2.com, I took a picture of that clown wearing that Make America Great Again hat as he is for at least 45 minutes spouting off his pro-Donald Trump rhetoric. Okay? I put that interview into a podcast on my website. And so Orlando Owens, who has gotten on the ballot in the 11th Assembly District, lying to African-American voters and masking the fact that he was a Trump-loving Republican, now you can hear him in his own words. And if I'm lying, I'm dying. Go listen to him. Go listen to the interview. He spells it all out. Now, let me be abundantly clear about this. If you're a Donald Trump supporter right now at this point, we have no use for you. You are not an American. You are an enemy of the state. Call it whatever you want. If you're a Donald Trump supporter right now, someone who believes that the American military should be unleashed on our citizens, you're an enemy of the state, and you have no business in our legislature. The last thing we need is Donald Trump policies and his sentiments in the 11th Assembly District. Thank you, Charles, even though you spell your name backwards. Thank you guys for listening. I appreciate it. We do this every day. I try to make these an hour, but there was a lot to talk about today. And as opportunities for us to come together arise, I will make sure that we promote those and we talk about those. Now share this. Let folks join this thing that we're trying to do. And I'm going to be the first one to say this. As much as I disagreed with them on literally everything, even if Orlando Owens wants to climb off of Donald Trump's shoulders, you're welcome back too. This is the time in which we need to be Americans. We got to put the divisions away. Put the things that divide us on the shelf. We need to protect our republic from a man who wants to harm American citizens. You're welcome back with us. We know you strayed for a while, but at the end of the day, you're an American too. And I fight for you, and I fight for your rights, and I fight for the same Constitution with you than with anybody else. Come and join us. Come and join us. Thank you, guys. I appreciate it. We will be back at it again tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. until 10 a.m.-ish Central Standard Time. And right now, I'm going to go and call Stacey Dash.